The Unconventional Therapist's Guide to Nothing.
Hey everyone, welcome to The Unconventional Therapist, where each and every week we take a topic, theme, or thing, overanalyze it, and make it all make sense in the scheme of life, living, and mental health. My name is Dave. I'm joined here with my co-host Greg, who clearly knew I messed up on our intro.
Wait, you got a case of the giggles already, huh?
Yeah, well, you were giving me that look because you know I messed up. You know I messed up.
I love that when people are talking and they just mess up a word, and you just look at them and knowingly, and they feel knowingly. It. So listen, we've talked about the 7 deadly sins. That's one of our most popular episodes, I think, right?
It's probably our third most popular.
Okay. So in that episode, you want to find out where I'm going with this? In that episode, we learned that maybe the worst thing that you can be is a fraud. It's like the ultimate sin. And I think we developed sort of an intrinsic fear of being exposed as a phony or incompetent. Like even when you're young, Dave, I don't know if you can associate with this, but like I remember I went out and I got a skateboard, and there was a kid in my neighborhood, and I'm going to call him out. His name was Joe Leal, and he was a really, really good skateboarder.
Wait, what was his name?
Joe Leal.
That was his first name?
No, Joe was his first name. And then Leal.
Leal?
Yeah.
I thought you were saying Joe Leal.
He was a skateboarding machine. I mean, the guy's probably like, how does that guy even know my name? But I knew him. And he was out there. He was riding the rails. He was doing all these things.
Wait, Greg, have you talked to this guy before?
I don't think so.
I'm not gonna lie. This is borderline creepy that you're mentioning the name.
He was cooler than me.
Never talked to him.
Yeah.
And you paid enough attention that you're actually 35 to 40 years later talking about him on a podcast and saying his name.
Well, not 35 to 40, Dave. I wasn't 0
45 to 50 years later, you're sitting here talking about him on a podcast.
Well, the reason why I bring him up is I bought a skateboard because I wanted to I liked the culture, I guess you could say. And the crew, and his crew, they would say, poser. Right? And it's like, well, yeah, maybe. Like right now, I'm a poser, but give me a chance.
And then later he said, stalker.
Well, now he can say that. But it's not like he was born with a skateboard in his hands. So at some point, you have to be the apprentice. I don't know what you want to call it, but this. I'm trying to lead us into this idea of imposter syndrome and how maybe we had felt that way.
I just want to tell Joe Leal, this is not a scripted podcast, and I did not know he was going to put you on blast on this podcast. Yeah. You sound like a really cool guy, and I am also now in awe of you the way that Greg was when he was 8, 9, 10, 12 years old. So I just want to apologize for how Greg's making us look, and just let you know that like his actions don't reflect on who I am.
Or the podcast.
If you ever want to hang out, just let me know. We can go skateboard sometime.
The apology is due. He had no idea. I was watching from the bushes. You know what I mean? And then just one day, I just
getting weirder and weirder.
That skateboard.
What is going on?
No, listen, I was cool. I was more of a BMX guy though, but I cornered the market on
Greg,
that.
You were neither. You were a Bush's guy.
Yeah.
You were Bush's guy.
Yeah. When I was young, it took me a
rode
while
your
to kind of
BMX to the bushes to check out Joe Leal and just be in awe of him.
Yeah. And now, not much has changed. And you know what I've learned through thinking of all this? We're all doing it. We're not.
We're not sitting in bushes watching Joe Leal, Greg.
You're right.
Metaphorical bushes?
You're right. Right. Let's keep it metaphorical.
Metaphorical Joe Leals.
That's right. Well, no, that's an actual Joe Leal. And we've mentioned his. Do we have to pay him anything?
Yeah, once we get paid, we'll give him the money.
Yeah.
We're waiting.
All right. What are we talking about here, Dave?
Joe Leal.
No.
Greg hanging out in bushes. This is like the best story I've heard from you ever. Like,
we're not talking about my questionable childhood.
I love this story though. This is gold. This is actual gold. We're talking about imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Which is that feeling. If I were to, I'll let you describe it too, because we probably have, I think almost, you could probably go around a room of people and we all might describe it a little differently because I do think it's like sort of personal to each person. In my view of it, it's this idea that you're in a role that you've worked towards or you've kind of elevated to or that you're going for. You're in this role and you suddenly get this wave of feeling like, I don't belong here.
Yeah.
Everyone around me is more qualified than me. They look at them. Look at their smug faces. They all know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Look at those Joe Leals all over the place. You know, it's like, it's this idea that like, I don't belong here. I'm not supposed to be here. They're all going to see that I don't belong here and I'm just embarrassing myself and I'm going to fail.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right. Like, I'm not worthy. I don't belong here. These are the things that and you're associating it. It seems like with professions and like being like whatever that might be.
But you're right. It could totally span into other domains for sure.
I sometimes feel it when, maybe it's after the new year and you're headed back to the gym and you're feeling a little like an imposter at the gym. Like you haven't been there. You're just getting on the treadmill for the first time. Do you ever get that sense? Like your first time in the gym, like people are looking at you being like, what is this guy doing here? He doesn't even, he's one of those New Year's resolution guys.
I did take like a 20-year break from the gym.
Yeah.
When kind of back on a break again, got to go back. So I guess I'll find out when I return again next week, hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah. But I always feel like a poser when I do that. A poser, I'm using an imposter.
Poser, stalker.
Yeah. As for a profession though, I feel you kind of feel like you fooled everyone up into this point, like us at work. Well, let's talk about what triggers it, I guess. Like my history, for me personally, so this is going to be a lot of a personal, like how we feel, I guess. Like for me personally, I didn't come from a place where, I guess I should put it like this. Like, so in the Navy, I kind of felt like an imposter. Like I felt like maybe I was into some things that the other people weren't into. I was into books. I was into my shirt wasn't ironed perfectly all the time like everyone else. And then when I got into academia and grad school and all that, I kind of felt like I was a little too Navy for them, like a little too rough around the edges or something. Like I never really felt like an imposter in both worlds, to be honest.
Yeah. I think that, for me, I've felt that a lot too, is like definitely in college, in grad school, throughout the time. It was kind of, it's funny because I also feel it sometimes within like our roles, like gender roles and stuff like that. Like, I'm around a bunch of people that are more interested in things that I feel like at times that I'm supposed to be more interested in and I'm not. That's kind of always something that I've felt. In school, I always felt like I was putting courses that were for smarter people, but then I always felt like I wasn't worthy of being in there. Yeah, for sure. And then in grad school, oh my God, that's like a whole nother ballgame when it comes to imposter syndrome. It's this idea that like, because you're kind of not just learning, but you're developing your profession, right? You're like developing it to become a certain profession. It's like you have this like idea of what you're supposed to become, and everybody kind of has that idea. And throughout the whole time, you're just like, I can't do this. I shouldn't be doing this. I'm not qualified for this.
Yeah, it's kind of tells you something scary about the world. But before I say that, like I understand completely what you're talking about. Like if I have like a plumber come over my house, like my neighbor's a plumber. One time my sink wouldn't stop leaking and he came over and it was all fixed in like 3 minutes. And I just felt like, I almost wanted to be like, all right, well, I'll be out back chopping down a tree or something, just so I could kind of feel like I felt kind of emasculated by that. And, you feel like an imposter. But what you're talking about is another scary thing where we're looking up to these professors as people who have all the answers, or other therapists at the time, right? And then so we think they have all the answers. We think they have all the answers. We graduate, we get into these positions, we get jobs. And then all of a sudden we realize no one has all the answers. That's like a scary part about it for me. Like you think they had all the answers, or did they have all the answers and I just don't? What am I doing here? Like that feeling, it's very scary. Like, remember we talked about, and I won't give her name, but the young lady we work with, and she is new to the office, and she was telling us that story about a patient she was very worried about, and he was going through some very serious things. and talking about suicide. And she's like, well, asking us, well, what am I going to do? Like, this person needs help. And it's like, yeah, that's you. You're the person that's going to help them. And it's that moment, like, holy shit, like, here I am. You have to, it's a big, powerful moment where it's like, you have to sort of start faking it in a sense.
So there is the crazy thing about imposter syndrome and how most, like a lot of us, I think, experience it. I can't speak for everybody in the world. The waves that you get of it.
Yeah.
So there's moments where you feel like I'm nailing this. Like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm good at it. I know I can help people. And then suddenly something just comes over you. Sometimes it happens and I'm like, I don't even know what triggered that thought. I don't know why I'm suddenly feeling this way. But like right now, I just feel like I have no idea why anyone would want to come in and see me.
Or like, and when you think about when you think about the past and how you've like helped people in the past, you're like, oh, I must have gotten lucky with that one.
Yeah.
You think you kind of feel that.
Well, or I can't even recollect that. Like, I won't even go there. Like, my mind will just go to the negative stuff. Like, all right, so we all experience like bad days, right? And there's a day where maybe your attention is like so low, and this is not a job. Like, as being a therapist, not having a good attention span in a day, not a great thing.
Nope.
Somebody
be like, what was
telling
that?
you, somebody's telling you a story, and then all of a sudden, like out of nowhere in that story, they ask you a question, and you're like, "Oh, what?" Like, and it just totally
take deep breaths. Just take deep breaths.
Yeah, you just totally shows you didn't listen to any of that story, or you couldn't follow along. That's the worst thing that could happen in a job that's like relatively sort of. I'm not gonna say it's easy, but like, I'm sitting there listening and guiding people. I mean, it takes a level of skill that not everybody has, but at the same time, it's not like I'm like lifting heavy weights or doing things that take like superhuman strength. Like, I should be able to do it. And then when you don't, it's like, what am I doing? You know?
So I was talking to my friend about this, and she's a hairdresser, and I was saying, like, man, you must really feel that too. When I was thinking about it, because you imagine, like, you go to get a haircut or something, and anybody can ask for anything. And I was like, what do you do when you don't know what to do? And she literally said, you have to fake it. And it's like this theme that keeps coming up. And I was thinking about like what other professions must be feeling this. Definitely teachers. Dave, like when we've taught classes, when we've been in the professor role, it's like all of a sudden we're supposed to know we're supposed to know everything. We don't know anything more than we knew,
Yeah.
And you're always so you think about teachers, you think about doctors, for God's sakes. I remember one time I was at the doctor's office and I caught him on Google, and I'm like, boy, I hope he's not Googling someone's diagnosis. But it's like, why wouldn't he be doing that? Why wouldn't he?
I'm not gonna lie, I've Googled things while in session because, like, oh, I don't know the answer to that. Let me Google it.
Yeah.
If it feels like it's an okay thing to Google, like I'll do that. But like, yeah, and sometimes I'm like, I should know this stuff. That was all right. So that was something that was really hard for me and gave me a lot of anxiety and imposter syndrome feelings. I was having a really hard time when we were graduating, feeling like I knew specific interventions to use for like just for everyday things. Yeah. So like there are specific techniques that we as therapists use, like cognitive behavioral therapy, DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy. There's more. I cannot go into my brain at the moment. Imposter syndrome. But I was like really struggling, and I felt like in order to be successful at this job, I should know how to use these interventions and these techniques. And I put so much pressure on myself to learn them. And it was helpful because I was learning them and utilizing them right away. Cause like suddenly we're no longer in grad school and we're right on, like, thrown into the mix of everything. And it was giving me so much imposter syndrome though, that I felt like I already graduated and I didn't master these things. I was thinking that everyone around me was using these things. They were fluent in them. And then I was like, no, we were having supervisions and groups. Nobody was talking about that stuff. I'm sitting here talking about how I use CBT technique and I use this, and I realize nobody is using this stuff. Like, not the way that I thought they would. Like, it's kind of integrated into the work we do, but like people aren't sitting around and just thinking about techniques and like, hey, what technique did you use for this diagnosis?
No, because when you start doing that, you're not listening.
Right.
You know what I mean? You're not listening to the person. And that's what they need you to do. They need you to be there with them, and they need you to be listening. And you know what people really want is for you to do the best that you can for them. That's it.
Well, you know? and the other part that I was not, I realized later why I was so hyper focused on this part. This was the part that wasn't about me. Like, sure, it was about my ability to like retain the information and just carry out a technique, but like it totally discredited everything that was innate about me that made me effective in the work. And that was kind of brought to my attention by our supervisor Liz, who we kind of sing her praises because she's really great at building us up. She reflected to me like, a major part of the whole process of being a therapist is that interpersonal relationship, which involves all the qualities of our own personalities and the feelings that we're able to express and the energy that we give and the listening skills, all things that cannot be learned.
Yeah, every time Liz is talking this up, though, don't you kind of feel like when Liz is talking about, oh, like, you know, you guys are the future, you guys are the best therapists we have here, all the whatever that she's saying, don't you feel like, boy, I hope she never finds out that I'm not? Like, aren't you like on some level thinking that?
I don't. She's never said that to me, Greg. No, just kidding.
I know that's not true.
No,
I know that's not true. But you know what this is making? You know what's all the more we've spent time in school, and the more I've spent like talking to other professionals, and in any profession, I've kind of realized that maybe there are no real experts, and I think that's very scary for me. It's existential. People want answers. And, you know, when you make it to the position where you're supposed to be the one with the answers and you don't have them, it's a really scary place to be.
So I think that would apply to our field, to our profession. I think but there are fields where that might not be the case. Like it might be something else. For example, I was talking to someone yesterday who is a professor. His expertise is the Soviet history. He's developed, like, he's written books about it and like different aspects of it. I've talked to you before about it because he actually wrote a book about the rise of horror films in the Soviet Union. Like, the guy's a freaking genius about Soviet history. And he actually started talking about imposter syndrome that he was having in grad school. And like, because his interests were kind of different than others. Like, he liked horror movies, punk music. And he was like, as he was learning, he's like, people aren't going to be into this. Nobody's going to like this. So his was more about like people not accepting him or connecting to his methods of how he's going to be teaching. So for him, he is an expert, but it was more about he didn't trust the qualities in himself or his own, like the things that were going to make him effective.
Right. But say like I found a fact about Russian history or whatever that he didn't know. And I tossed that up to him in front of his class. And he was like, oh, I didn't realize that about Russian history. Like, he might in that moment be made to feel like an imposter by that. See, that's the thing. We let one little negative emotion in and it destroys all the credibility, destroys all the years of studying and the work we put into this, that little seed of doubt. And
yeah, I'm agreeing. I agree with you that definitely when we're exposed, when we are kind of like, because we have this idea of who we want to be and we want to come off a different way. Like, I talked to you about this before, but like when I go to our office, I dress a little different for that job than I do my other job. My other job, I dress a little casual. When I'm in this office, I dress a little bit more professional. For me, that's important because it gives me a presence that I'm looking for. So it's like this idea, like we're building our professional identity, right?
Right.
And then when something comes up that contradicts how our view of our professional identity, suddenly a little chip happens, right?
Yeah, like if someone sees you out wearing your Vans, they're like, hey, imposter.
Yeah.
You know, and you might feel that way.
But I'm like, I'm not at work, but I still might internalize that. and say, oh boy, now they're not going to see me the same when I am at work.
Well, there's something here that this thing has been going on for a really long time. And I remember reading, Plato and all the dialogues when he was talking about Socrates and how the oracles decided that Socrates was the smartest of all men. And the reason why Socrates came to the conclusion that he was is he used to go around and he used to talk to all of these experts, like the expert of law, the expert of religion, whatever you wanted to label you wanted to give them. And he would poke holes and see like, hey, you don't really know about, like talking to a judge, you don't really know everything about justice. You really can't even define justice. And everyone kind of like hated him for this, and eventually would be, the end of him. But when people would ask him, well, why do you think that the oracles said that you were the smartest person alive? And Socrates would be like, well, I'm the smartest person alive because I'm the only one that seems to realize that I don't have any answers. And I've always kind of identified with that. I've always thought like, that sounds a lot like me. You know what I mean? Like I don't have a lot of answers. And does that make me smart? I don't know. Maybe because I'm confident in saying that I don't have all the answers. But what I will do is try to be as authentic as possible and try to and I think we're going to start talking about this idea of faking it till you make it, how that could be good, how that could be bad, because I think it gets a bad rap. But I mean, I think it could be good if you're trying to become who you want to be. If you're trying to become this helpful, ideal self that you have in mind, I don't think there's anything more authentic than that. When I think it gets dangerous is when people are faking it to deceive people, like we've seen. And I wonder if you want to talk a little bit about, and we didn't prepare for this or anything, but we both talked about that Dr. Dunch case, and that he was faking it.
Yeah.
And he was making it. But I think that's not what we're talking about here.
Yeah. So with the idea of faking it till you make it, when it's used in an appropriate way, it's this idea that we are in a role that we're supposed to be in, right? This is like we have a view of ourselves, we have a goal, we're working towards something. We're not like completely out of our realm of where we're supposed to be. We have the skills that we need to be there. Oh, we're just lacking that confidence.
Yeah.
or we just feel like we're a novice in a world of experts or something like that. And the idea of fake it till you make it is really helpful to me. Personally, it has gotten me really far. I long time ago, it's sort of a weird thing that how it was like communicated to me, but it really did sit with me and kind of stuck with me. I was very young and I was in a job where I was a supervisor and I had to work with some people that were older and just like didn't necessarily want to be told what to do by like a 21, 22-year-old man. And my supervisor was like, you're a male, you're young, just smile and you'll get through everything just fine. And I didn't know how to take that. But it was like, something about it was like, okay. So I just started and I got what she was saying. It was more about like, just look confident.
Mm-hmm.
She's telling me like smile rather than looking like a nervous wreck.
Yeah. Like it's like a placebo effect.
Yes. And she pointed out the fact that I was male because I was working in a predominantly female environment. So already I was like an outsider.
Yeah.
You could easily be like, probably just, I was like, it's a pack of wolves, and I'm just getting thrown in. I don't know what to do. She's like, just smile and talk and you'll be fine. And I always kind of like took that into any environment I was going into. Like, even when I'm at my most nervous, if I really want to get a point across, or if I really need to like just handle some business, I just have to go in there looking confident. And
well, I'm sure it doesn't help that. I mean, I'm sure it helps that you're stunningly handsome, and
I absolutely 100%.
I don't think that works for anyone,
right?
You know what I mean? This is why I always say to you, we should have a YouTube channel, and these downloads go through the roof.
Right.
What I think, Dave, is you have no choice but to fake it if you're growing into any position.
Yes.
Like you get out of school, and not even school. Like, see, you start carpentry, like all these jobs, all these super important jobs that you're like building someone's house or creating something for someone. In the beginning, you're faking it. You have to get the skateboard before you become a skateboarder.
Yes.
You have to start somewhere. And I think that we have this pressure on ourselves to, your first day as a barber, you're going to do all perfect haircuts. No, you're not, but you have to start faking it. You have to start just going for it. There's no other choice. It's your, that step that you have to take. It's so important, and we're all doing it. And I think at the end, I'm kind of coming to the consensus that I think that that's the way we'd rather have it. And I want to get back to that point in a little while. But I think faking it till you make it has everything to do with intention. If you have the right intentions, faking it till you're making it's not. I wish there was a different phrase.
I think some people get turned off by the phrase. I remember early on in our grad school experience talking about fake it till you make it. And me personally never had a negative connotation of it, because it is something that is, like I said, when I was like in my early 20s, I was already kind of understanding it and doing it. But when we went to grad school, me and you were much older.
Yeah.
Not too much older, but older. But I remember, and a lot of the people in our class were kind of like, oh, I hate that. I hate fake it till. I'm like, I don't know. Like, I think it's actually wonderful. Like, because if people knew what I was feeling on the inside, nobody would listen to me ever.
Yeah.
If I'm a supervisor of anything, you know what I mean? Like, you have to lead people. You have to be someone that they're going to want to follow, or they're going to want to listen to, because they say that person right there, that guy knows what he's doing. I'm gonna listen to him. They're not doing that to the person who's stuttering over every word because they're so nervous they can't think, like make thoughts, or who's like looking like body language is huge. And I'm someone who slumps. I kind of slump over. I close up a lot. Like I'm if I'm at home, my hood's on.
Yeah.
I'm like, I definitely am like, but like at work, I'm like a totally different person, because I also use my body language to express confidence. Even if I'm not feeling it, it makes you feel confident.
Of course, because you project that confidence, you somehow manage to get something done because you're trying. Right. And sometimes that's all it takes is doing. Doing is the most important thing. Get out of your head, start doing. And that confidence, that fake confidence, becomes real confidence.
Yes.
And you build on that. It's just how it works.
And we're not just preaching, because I think that we both have experienced that. We've both kind of had struggles with it from periods of time. Like, I'm not an overly, like, my self-esteem is not like through the roof. Like,
no,
I have plenty of intrusive thoughts throughout my days, plenty of doubts and all that stuff. But I do know what has worked for me at times where I've needed it to work, or what's helped me kind of advance in certain situations, or even just have people have faith in me. And those things have all had to do with the stuff we're talking about here.
So I was thinking about, and that thing that you're talking about, people kind of like almost feeling like haters. I was earlier today, I was on like going through reels. It's like old man TikTok, like, Instagram reels. And it was Dwight from The Office. And he was talking about this thing. And I was like, oh, wow, that's like really smart and insightful. And just talking about something that, maybe to someone else, it seemed like obvious, but it was just something about something he did in his life, and it really helped him out and started making him feel better. And I looked in the comments, and the first comment was like, here we go, another pseudo intellectual. And it's like, man, you're getting called out for being an imposter, and he's just trying to have, it's just a really tough environment sometimes. And I think that contributes to it. Like, everyone's sort of trying to take each other down a peg so they can bring themselves up. And I don't think that's helpful at all. And I was thinking, like, what could be, I don't want to say the cure, because I don't know if we've mentioned that imposter syndrome, despite being a syndrome, isn't really a diagnosable condition. It's not.
No, it's kind of like Peter Pan syndrome.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's this, but what's the opposite of it? And I think, like, you always love to use opposite action. Like, what is it taking away, and I think authenticity is the opposite of it, right? Mm-hmm. Trying to be as authentic as possible. And I had a patient say to me, someone said to him that they held their two fists out, and they said, and they were apart, they were holding their fists apart. And they said, one fist represents who you want to be, and the other fist represents who you project to the world. And the closer you can get those together, you know, that make them one, the more authentic you are. And I was like, wow, that's really kind of nice. And, you know, and I was almost saying to him, and if your fists get really wide apart, then you're opening up space for, you know, mental illness, anxiety, depression. Well, it's intense, right?
Yeah. I thought you were going to say a slap.
Yeah. Or a hug, Dave.
Oh,
you're opening up your hands.
So you're going to say, what did the five fingers say to the face?
So, I mean, here we go. We're talking about this. I mean, we're not exactly doing a commercial for our practice here. Come see us. We're faking it.
But I think this is all right. So where we're going with this, though, is yeah, we're faking it is not the best message. But I think what we're saying is those moments where you're having that self-doubt. So it's coming back to that imposter syndrome. The you know, sure, there's part of it is like when we suddenly don't feel like experts, but a lot of it is just like a basic insecurity or lack of trust in who we are. It's that doubt in ourselves. It's like we really do struggle sometimes just being able to trust ourselves that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. And I think that imposter syndrome itself is just a sign that we are pushing ourselves out of our comfort zones.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that means we are on the right track. When we step out of what is familiar, what we are used to, it doesn't mean you're not supposed to be doing it. It doesn't mean you're not qualified to do it. It just means it's no longer comfortable, which is great because at some point it will get comfortable because it will be familiar if you keep at it. And that's the thing. We just have to keep at it. Opposite action, Greg, perfect. You know why? Because imposter syndrome makes you want to quit. Mm-hmm. It makes you want to give up. So what's the opposite of quitting and giving up? It's not giving up. It's, right. I'm gonna fit in here.
It is not giving up.
It is going to be my new familiar place. And I think that you and I can both say, and I'm going to speak for you because I don't know that you had this thought. I'm sure at some point in time you were like, this is probably not the job for me. I shouldn't be here. I'm not qualified for this. Other people around me know more than me. Maybe I should just quit this and stick to my day job.
Are you reading my mind right now?
I was talking about therapy, not the podcasting.
Oh God, I'm faking in that too. I thought I was at least decent at the chat.
All realms. It affects all realms.
But you know what I was thinking as you're saying that, Dave, and maybe we've mentioned it before, but you're absolutely right. And I always love that metaphor of the tree where when you're green, you're growing, but you're also vulnerable. So when a tree or any kind of plant is going to grow, they have to shoot up all these little delicate green sprouts. And that's the most vulnerable part of it. But if they don't do that, they can't get any bigger. They can't get any stronger. So this is what they need to do to become what they want to be, to become what they're supposed to be. And that's what we're doing. And I also think that part of it is, you know, for us in our position, and maybe everyone, it's a position that they've looked up to, that they've aspired to be for so long. And then all of a sudden, that person that you've looked up to, that position you looked up to, that's you. And that's crippling, right? Like, that's me now. People are going to ask me for the answers now. It's hard. It's hard to deal with.
Yeah. And, you know, just to take it out of the realm of just our profession, because I'm sure there's people listening to this that are not in our profession.
Yeah, let's do that.
A ton of other professions. But like, Greg, can you say a year ago, or maybe a little bit more, you would have thought that you would be doing a podcast with 60 plus episodes spanning, you know, over a good amount of people each episode?
Yeah.
Let's just put it this way: more than just our friends and family listen at this point, which is great and awesome. And even if it was just our friends and family, still awesome. Thank you for listening.
Less awesome, but yeah.
Less awesome, but still okay. But like, would you ever have thought that this would be a thing you were doing?
No.
All right. Now, at some point, we both have reflected to each other, I'm sure, in conversation. Man, I don't know how this is going. I don't know if do you think it's worth keeping up? Like, we didn't necessarily say that, but I'm sure we had those thoughts because like, I thought it was going to like go faster. I had already kind of understood that it was going to go a little slower at first, but like, for you, did you have that thought? Like maybe this.
Yeah. And I was like, why do I always sound like my nose is clogged? like, you know, you hate your voice. the first couple episodes, you do feel like a complete imposter.
Yeah. We stuck with it. And that has been challenging because, as you said, sometimes people just want to tear you down. So you're always going to be faced with those external factors that can be hurtful, harmful to your psyche, but like you push forward, and here we are. And now you're dabbling in 2 podcasts.
Yeah,
I also have 2 podcasts. We're podcasters. Crazy to say. That's weird to say out loud. I actually don't know if I want to say that out loud ever again.
Yeah, still feels a little impostery. Now, what do you think? Like, what other professions do you think struggle with this pretty hard?
I think all. My point is, I think everything. I think it could fit into anywhere. I bet almost anybody would say at some point in time they looked around, they were like, or they had a feeling like, I don't know if this is right for me. I think some are faced with it more often than others because of the like. If you're in a field where you have to help someone, like a doctor, a nurse, anything like that, I guarantee you're probably faced with it a little bit more frequently because of the direct impact you're having on another human being. But with that being said, you could be imagine telemarketers. Oh my God.
Dude, tattoo artists, hairdressers, like a barber. I always wondered how anybody can come in and they're like, all right, I know how to do that.
Any artist.
Yeah, authors. Exactly. How about parents? That's like the ultimate imposter syndrome. I mean, like even having, like imagine a priest struggling with their faith, or like any kind of religious leader. It's like
gigolos,
they, maybe they have to take some kind of medication.
But
it's funny because like I'm talking to my son all the time, and I'm always expecting my oldest son to have all the values that I have and none of the flaws. Like I'm always kind of thinking like, why aren't you this way? Why aren't you doing it like this? This is what's important. And like, I don't ever put in my mind what I was like at that age. I just want to mold him into what I think will be best for him. But I don't know if that's right. Parenting has got to be one of the hardest like areas of that, where you just don't know what the hell you're doing. Yeah. You're in that car and that baby, there's no nurses around anymore, and you're taking that baby home. Oh, great. We're all fucked. That's the feeling, right? What are we gonna do with this little thing?
I think you could also kind of go into things as subtle as like, or as small as hobbies and interests. Like you brought up skateboarding. I'm sure there's people who are super into skateboarding and suddenly like, I'm not as good as that person, or am I a real skater? Am I a real skater boy? I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like, what if we all wanted to get? What if you and I decided, oh, we're gonna start getting into snowboarding, and we get all this snowboarding gear, and we spend we're old dudes, we can spend a couple extra bucks, right, and get all the gear, right, and we get to the mountain and we're falling on our heads. We can't even get up the lift.
I had that experience.
We're posers. You had that experience.
Greg, I am I consider myself a horror buff. Mm-hmm. I'll talk to another horror buff, and I just completely like turn into like, oh my God, like they know so much more than me. And I'm like, why do I do that to myself?
Yeah.
Like, and it's a small thing, but like I instantly put myself in a lower position than other people when it comes to being like, all right, back to your point about the experts. Yeah. Like I almost take people, if they like know more about a certain thing, or if I internalize or interpret that they know more than me, I put myself into this category. Like I'm not as knowledgeable about this subject as them.
And then I walk in and I'm like, have you guys ever seen The Craft? And then all of a sudden,
yes, Greg's here. Look at that guy.
You feel so much better. Yeah. Because you can shit on me.
No, but like, I could, do you ever feel like that with like philosophy? Do you ever talk to people and be like, oh man, I thought I knew a ton, but no, probably not, right?
No, usually I feel like I'm pretty on top of it. No, I'm just kidding. No, of course. No. You know what upsets me now? Like somehow there's like a loop of it on like social media. People will post it all the time. And I'm like, man, I had to search so hard for some of those quotes. And now they're just floating around and everyone's just regurgitating all of them. And I don't know.
I'm terrible with movie quotes, and people throw them out left and right. And I'm like, I saw that movie and I don't know the quote you're saying.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? I wanted to bring up something because you mentioned it before we started. So as much as people might be uncomfortable with the idea of doctors and therapists and these professions, quote unquote, faking it until they make it, would you we were talking about AI a little bit.
Yeah.
And if you could just type in, listen, I'm having really hard depression. I don't like doing the things I used to like to do. My sleep's all messed up. I feel kind of like helpless and hopeless, and I'm not getting along with anyone anymore. And you just type that into, Chat GPT or whatever this thing is, and it gave you the exact answer. Would that even be helpful? Or is the human connection that the doctor provides, or the human connection that the therapist provides, is that part of the healing process? Are you looking for answers, or are you looking for comfort? And is there a difference? See, that's the thing. Like, I don't think that people are really just looking for someone to tell them the answer, because I think in most people's lives, they know the answer. They
Are you
know what
talking
the
about our
answer is.
profession?
Yeah, I think especially our profession, when I'm talking about, you can Google your symptoms and it could tell you that you have OCD, or it could tell you that, you have a major depressive disorder. But does that help you?
Yeah, no. And in our profession, one of the misconceptions is that we give answers, and we don't. I mean, I have people ask me questions looking for answers, and I often say, like, that's not my job to give you an answer. My job is to help you maybe work through it and think clearer on the subject, or guide you in a direction that I feel like you're kind of already wanting to go, but it's definitely not to give you an answer.
Yeah, or like kind of lead them there.
Yeah,
with questions that are they're like, like Socratic questioning,
but you're right about the feeling, because like I said earlier, a lot of it is like that interpersonal relationship of the therapist to the patient. And I actually had this conversation a lot lately, because it's come up where I found, over time, people having growth, or even just the fact that they've stuck with me as a therapist when I'm all right. So just to give an example, someone, a female who's had a bunch of trust issues with males, a bunch of poor relationship with males, but here she is having this therapist to patient therapeutic relationship ongoing, and that's never been an issue at all. That's never caused a hindrance. And I point that out, and I'm like, it's like, well, I felt comfortable with you. I felt like I could trust you. And I kind of like help point out, like, well, excellent, because like that kind of highlights that just because someone is a male doesn't mean necessarily that you won't be able to trust another male in the future. You know what I mean?
And that's in a perfect example of the relationship in and of itself is what's healing.
Yeah.
It's not the answer. It's not that, like, you've been wronged, or you have trauma in your past, or you're never going to, you have a fear of abandonment. None of that's as important as I'm feeling a relationship with a man that I've never felt before. And it's not based on sex. It's not based on anything like that. It's just based on, trust,
the corrective experience.
It's really powerful. And we're definitely saying this because we don't want AI to start taking over our jobs.
100%.
You know what I mean? Like Max Headroom or whatever.
I think everybody in America is worried at some point that AI is going to take over all of our jobs. Just to backtrack slightly, so you did bring up Dr. Dunch, and I feel like we kind of brushed over, and I apologize for that, because I know you were wanting to lead into that conversation a bit. One of the things we had talked about a few days ago, which I think was an interesting thought, and I knew we were going to forget it.
Well, I don't want to interrupt you, but who is Dr. Dunch? All
right, so Dr. Dunch was a character on that Dr. Death podcast, and I think they made a Lifetime movie about it. Essentially, he pretended to be a doctor. He was not. It's just, and he's couch surfing and then finds ladies to live with, but he's a fraud. He's
doing surgeries on people and damaging them, like paralyzing them, killing them over and over and over again.
And he's just an example of somebody who uses his personality, his charisma, his confidence, his overconfidence for evil, right? Now, we were having a conversation about this the other day. It's like, if this person who is not a doctor, there's so many examples of people like him in the world, but like for this one, if this person who is not a doctor is able to convince people based on confidence and charisma alone that he is what he says he is, and people are able to provide trust in him, go along with what he's saying, and allow him to do the most serious of surgeries and procedures, why do we feel like we shouldn't be able to do the same in our professions when we actually have like genuine intentions.
Yeah.
And like, why do we put ourselves in such a lower category than this person who's able to trick people, to use all those his personality skills for evil? Like, why can't we use them for good? Why do we hold ourselves back while this terrible person is able to kind of advance?
Because maybe there's nothing more dangerous than a person who thinks they have all the answers. Maybe self-doubt is what makes us safe.
It can limit us, but it can make us safe. So I think it's important that we understand this concept of imposter syndrome for this exact reason, because I think we need to understand where it's coming from. You're right. It is kind of like a self-inhibitory factor. It's like, so I don't overstep. I don't go way out of my range of skills or skill set, or where I should go. It kind of keeps me in lane. But if I don't understand it, I can also allow it to totally drive me off course and just quit.
So once again, awareness, intention, these are like authenticity. These are always going to be like the hallmarks.
I have one more thing that I think is super important for dealing with imposter syndrome.
Lay it on us.
Talk about it. Talk about it with your colleagues. One of the most helpful experiences, and actually dearest experiences, that I had with our cohort at grad school, Greg, was our group therapy class.
Oh, that was the best.
It was such an amazing class because I felt so many different emotions throughout that class. It was very vulnerable. Sometimes I actually left mad a couple of times, and I didn't really talk about it with others, but it was interesting for me to kind of work through that later.
Who you mad? Are you mad at me?
Yep. No, I was mad at the class a couple of times, or just topics that were talked about. But like at other times, I felt insecure. I felt like an imposter. And then we had a class one day where we talked about imposter syndrome, and everyone in our circle expressed having imposter syndrome. And then, and our professor for this is like the smartest man,
genius,
Dr. Beauvais. Charlie Beauvais is an absolute genius. He is so bright. He does such great work. His books have like helped so many people. He's so important in our field, in my opinion, especially in Rhode Island, but even beyond Rhode Island. He expressed he's had imposter syndrome.
And I was like, well, fuck it, then I quit.
It made me feel great though. I didn't feel that at all. I felt actually like, wow, everyone around me is feeling imposter syndrome, so that makes me feel good. But even my professor, and then we had other professors also express that.
But he's so good. Even if he wasn't, he would know this is the time to say I do. I mean, that guy, you have to admit, that guy, every time you ask him,
I didn't go there. Now you got me.
Every time you ask that guy a question without skipping a beat, he knew exactly the answer. It was crazy. But I'll tell you, I remember that group therapy fondly too. I think we were also worn out, and we had so much work, and we're taking on so much. We needed that. We all needed that, and everyone just let it rip. I mean, it was
that was a great course, great experience. But that collective experience of hearing other people talking about those self-doubts and how they're getting through them, or some people weren't getting through them, they were kind of letting them eat away at them, and just talking about it and just being able to lift each other up, or just by just sharing the same experience, was super important. And
very important.
Very,
and
very
hopefully
helpful.
People are getting that, like right now. Hopefully people are understanding, like whatever your field is, whatever your hobby is, whatever it is, if you're feeling self-doubt, everyone else is too. Yeah. Everyone, even the best, even the top of that field is feeling it too. And what can you do? As Dave says, keep going.
Yeah.
Keep going. You will get there. And I think that's the message that we have to send with this one, right?
Yeah.
Don't give up.
Don't give up. If you feel uncomfortable, that means you're probably on the right track.
Mm-hmm. You're growing.
Yep.
Right. That means you're alive. I mean, that's the Kierkegaard, the whole thing where he calls it the sickness unto death. When you're not feeling that, uncomfortable, almost dread, like you're doubting everything, then you're distracted. You're in your comfort zone. And yeah, I guess that's fine. But once that distraction goes away, you'll feel it right back.
Totally.
I always think about like athletes like Brady. That guy's going through a world of anxiety right now because he's been distracted for years and years and years. I know people don't think he is, but he's probably like, what's next? What do I do now? Take Phelps out of the pool. I mean, his gills close up. He is going to be anxious. What's next? It's true. But anyways.
I was going to quote a philosopher as well, but I didn't want to like give you imposter syndrome. So
okay. Yeah. We'll save it. Save it for next time. And then, we can take it from there. I was going to quote a horror movie. I was going to name one of my kids. The best I could come up with earlier was The Craft. That's
a good movie.
Which is a good one. Yeah. Yeah. I've just watched it recently.
Yeah. Well, I just did the Charlie Beauvais right there.
Yeah, thank you.
It made you feel really good.
You did, because I was like, I bind you, Nancy, and I was gonna start like, it made me feel good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Dave, I think we did okay.
I hope so. So thank you everybody for listening. Thank you for being interested. If you've listened this far, you were interested in this topic, and I think that this is a really important one. So I hope that we were able to shed some insight into our thoughts about it, but also maybe give some helpful hints on how to deal with it if you are struggling with it, which we all have at some point.
Yeah, and this one obviously a little less research focused. Like we kind of normally dig into a difficult subject as much as we can. So, I mean, if that's your thing, we definitely do that too. But this one was more, our feelings on it.
I'm not going to lie. I did listen to some other sources that tried to give more researchy information on it, and it sounded like a bunch of bullshit because it's more of a concept than a biological thing.
Don't listen to those posers.
The stalkers, posers. All right. Well, signing out is me, Dave, and Greg from the bushes, and we will see you later. Have a great night, everyone.
Back in the bushes.